Blond teen mocked black kid on the basketball court, not knowing he'd be his future coach. What happens when a kid who's been overlooked and underestimated suddenly holds the whistle? You won't believe how Melvin flipped the script and earned respect from even his toughest critics. What happened next left the entire gym silent and changed everything. The summer in Chicago was the kind of heat that made the asphalt beneath your feet feel like it might just melt away, turning the streets into a simmering grill, and the air hung so heavy and sticky it was like time itself had been trapped, refusing to move forward. Behind an old graffiti-covered library, a ragtag group of neighborhood kids gathered around the cracked basketball court, their skin glistening with sweat, their voices rising with every bounce of the ball. They were different from all walks, all shades, but bound by one relentless passion: basketball. Among them was Melvin, a 14-year-old boy with skin the deep color of freshly brewed coffee and eyes that carried a quiet dignity. A dignity he'd been forced to build piece by piece, stone by stone, since the day he could remember. That day, Melvin did something simple, something so ordinary that most would brush it off like it was nothing. But for him, it was an act of kindness, an anchor of humanity in a world that often tried to strip it away. The blistering heat did not stop him from noticing Mrs. Harris, the elderly neighbor, struggling with heavy bags of groceries on the uneven dirt path to her house. Without a word, he stepped forward, lifted one of the bags, and walked beside her, steady and silent, carrying more than just groceries, carrying respect. There was no fanfare, no need for applause, just a shared unspoken gratitude that didn't require words. This wasn't a show for anyone else. It was simply who Melvin was, the quiet hero of his block. But as life often shows us, the world is no place for quiet heroes, especially not for a black boy in a neighborhood where time seemed frozen and where the message was clear: know your place and don't forget it. The very moment Melvin set those grocery bags down on Mrs. Harris's porch and offered her a smile full of hope and warmth, a sharp laugh cut through the thick air. It was rough, arrogant, and loaded with disrespect. "Oh, look who it is! The little black kid from the other team thinks he can walk with the ladies in our neighborhood," came the booming voice of Brett, a blond boy with a face like it belonged on the cover of some magazine meant for the privileged few. His crew, kids toasted by the flames of daddy's money, sported fresh white sneakers, white smiles, and a confidence that smelled like entitlement. Melvin turned slowly to meet their eyes. He wanted to smile back, hold back the bitter laugh that usually stirred inside him, the one born from years of seeing the world look at him like he was less than. But this time, something inside him snapped. It was as if, for the first time, he truly felt that injustice wasn't just a scary word adults throw around. It was a sharp pain cutting deeper than he'd ever realized. "Forgot where you belong?" Brett sneered, puffing out his chest like a proud lion who once bit the wrong guy and now keeps reminding everyone about it to feel bigger. "Your ball's scared of your hands, kid. Maybe you better step aside and let the grown-ups play." The whole crew burst into laughter, their snickers spreading like some twisted vaccine against reason. Melvin stood still, a statue carved from the heat and noise, surrounded by scorn. Inside, a storm raged. The urge to snap back, to throw their words right back, battled with the quiet voice of Marcus, the older brother of his friend, who once told him, "Play for you, for who you are. Ignore those who ain't worth your time." So there he was, in front of those boys holding the ball. He threw it clumsily, missed the basket. The boys on the bench snorted. Brett made an exaggerated gesture, pretending to fall over from laughter. "Oh, sorry. Didn't your mama teach you how to play?" He mocked, like the gods had handed him the right to decide the fate of every kid who didn't look like him. But worst of all, no adult stepped in, no passerby, no school coach, no casual grown-up walking by, no words of shame, no sympathetic glances. Silence, consent to that shameless humiliation. Melvin gathered his things, clutching the worn leather ball, the same one that always felt like a friend in his toughest moments. As he passed by, he heard it clear as a whip crack across his back. "Hey, sign my ring. Maybe you'll make the NBA." If only as a stat, Brett's voice was the lash. But what truly cut wasn't the words. It was the silence that wrapped around them like a cloak. Inside Melvin, a fire kindled, a fire that squeezed his chest and made breathing hard. His young mind wrestled with a cruel truth. Why is kindness a weakness? Why does being good make you a target? Why do these boys in their fresh shoes and foreign tongues see themselves as gods, and him as a shadow. He walked away from the court without looking back, every step echoing with anger and doubt. Where is his place? Why does kindness provoke contempt? What Melvin didn't know then was that this was only the first blow to his pride, that ahead lay not just mockery and scorn, but a system built on distrust and barriers he would have to break down with his own two hands. But on that blazing day, he understood something crucial. In a world where justice is bought and sold like a commodity, he would have to be more than a player. He would have to be a fighter. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how it all unfolded. The school gym buzzed with the relentless hum of the ancient air conditioner, cranking so loud it sounded like it was trying to drown out the thick, simmering frustration hanging heavy in the stale summer air. A frustration that clung to the walls like the grime of years spent ignoring the voices nobody wanted to hear. Melvin sat there, shoulders slumped, his worn backpack digging into his shoulder. The weight of it nothing compared to the weight in his chest. In his hands, he clutched a single sheet of paper, an application to join the school's basketball team. But this was no ordinary piece of paper. It was a challenge, a silent plea stitched together with threads of hope and strands of desperate determination. Feelings that only those who've been grinding against a system built to hold them down could ever truly understand. His eyes flicked to the clock mounted high on the wall, time creeping by like molasses in January. He knew he'd be late. He knew the verdict that awaited him would likely be the same as it had been every year since he first set foot in that worn-down building. No, the council room held its usual suspects, the same tired faces with eyes clouded by decades of disappointment and resignation. And in the center sat Coach Murphy, a man whose gray hair and furrowed brow gave him the look of an old dusty book that nobody bothered to open. His gaze sliced through the room with a coldness that made you want to hide under the bleachers and never come out. "Melvin," came Murphy's voice, thin, sharp, loaded with a sneer that had no business coming from a man supposed to inspire youth. "Back again. What now?" Melvin placed the application on the desk carefully, doing his best to mask the nervous tremor in his hands. "I want to be on the team," he said, steady but honest. Murphy pushed his glasses up his nose with a sigh that sounded like he was trying to polish away the truth etched deep inside. "You know spots are limited. We need players who fit the system, who match our style." "I trained all season," Melvin said. The words not a plea, but a statement of fact. "I did everything I could to be ready." The coach's smile was ice. Sure, he replied, voice dripping with condescension. "But in this school, special kids have always ended up on the bench." Those words hit Melvin like a freight train. Not just talk, but a brutal, unyielding reality that pressed down on his chest, making each breath harder than the last. He stood, the walls closing in like a cage, and walked out, leaving the room behind but carrying the weight of its coldness inside. That same evening, the neighborhood rec center was alive with chaos, a brutal, no-holds-barred knockout tournament where survival was measured in grit, not paperwork or petitions. Melvin was on the court with the South River Bulls, heart pounding, each leap a battle cry against the world that kept telling him he didn't belong. Suddenly, the doors slammed open and in walked Brett, a sunbeam piercing the shadows, dripping with privilege and the arrogance of entitlement. Cradled in his arms was a basketball, emblazoned with the logo of an elite club, and behind him, his clique swaggered like kings who believed the streets belonged to them. Well, Brett sneered, a smirk playing on his lips. "Look who thinks he's somebody again." The game kicked off, fast, brutal, unforgiving. For those not in, there were no rules. Melvin dribbled, danced, and found his shot, sinking a perfect three-pointer that should have been the crowd's moment of glory, until a sharp elbow caught him in the ribs, sending him sprawling. "Don't step on the court if you can't stand up for yourself," Brett shouted, his voice a weapon. Marcus, Melvin's friend and the game's referee, blew the whistle, eyes blazing. "Enough," he said, cutting through the chaos. The crowd roared against Brett's gang, some pulling out phones, capturing every second. Within moments, the scene exploded across social media. Justice for Melvin was born. By nightfall, the hashtag was everywhere, sparking conversations in hallways, lunchrooms, and living rooms, finally shining a spotlight on a long-ignored injustice festering within the school walls. Yet the administration remained silent, as if their closets were stuffed with skeletons too loud to face. At home, Melvin stared at the glowing screen, the video of his fall, and the harsh elbow racking up thousands of views. Inside him swirled a cocktail of pain and a quiet, fierce satisfaction. Looks like I'm not alone anymore, he thought. No one had seen it coming that morning, that one rough night would turn into a wildfire that no one could put out. But the system, cold, indifferent, and deeply biased, never hands out easy wins. Each step forward felt like climbing a mountain made of stone and suspicion. A few days later, word came down. Coach Murphy suspended Brett for a week and canceled the big game. The school buzzed with rumors and tension, students whispering, some celebrating, others fearful. Then in the auditorium, a stranger appeared, tall, confident, a college diploma hanging on the wall behind him, and a name that resonated like a bell, Justin Rose. He came bearing a program called Talent is Character, an initiative designed to give opportunities to those the system routinely overlooked. Justin called Melvin to the stage and announced he was becoming a junior coach in this new program. The crowd erupted. Applause thundered. Even Brett, once Melvin's fiercest critic, stood in the back, bewildered and unsure. Their eyes met, no words spoken, but a silent acknowledgement that old roles were shifting, that the game was changing. When Justin Rose stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, as if the very walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something that had been a long time coming. His voice cut through the stillness, strong, confident, and tinged with a dry irony that seemed to say, "Get ready, because this is the real show you've been waiting for." He wasn't just a coach. He was a man worn down by the tired old ways, ready to shake up a system that had kept too many voices unheard, too many talents buried beneath layers of neglect and prejudice. "Melvin Watson," Justin said, locking eyes with the young man who had weathered storms most couldn't even imagine. "You're not just a player. You're the leader we've been searching for. Your path hasn't been easy, but that's exactly what makes you worthy. From this day forward, you're not only a participant, you're a coach for the younger teams. You're here to build a new era." The room exploded into applause, the sound swelling like a rising tide, washing over even those who just yesterday had spat on Melvin's name, now forced to look at him with a newfound respect. Melvin stood there, feeling the weight of every struggle, every insult, every moment of doubt finally making sense, like the pieces of a broken puzzle snapping together. The first practice was a test, not just for Melvin, but for the entire team. The gym smelled of sweat, dust, and something more elusive, the silent fear of stepping into the unknown. The teenagers whispered among themselves, throwing curious and skeptical glances at the young coach who didn't fit their picture of what a successful mentor looked like. "Who the hell gave this guy the whistle?" one whispered, barely concealing disbelief. "Wait a minute," Brett cut in, the boy who had once tried to knock Melvin off the court. "He's the same kid who almost put me on the floor. Now he's my coach?" Sarcasm swirled through the air like smoke, but Melvin didn't flinch. "Listen up," he said firmly, his voice steady and clear. "I didn't come here to make friends. I came to teach you how to play and how to stand tall. If you think this is some kind of show, you're dead wrong. On this floor, we learn to respect each other and win, even when the world's stacked against us." The early sessions were a mixed bag. Some treated it like a game of hide and seek with their own potential, running from the challenge. Others hung on Melvin's every word, clutching his lessons like lifelines thrown into a raging sea. He taught them more than basketball. He taught them resilience, how to take the hits, not just on the court, but in life, how not to let the disdain of others dim the fire inside. A month later, Melvin's team won their first tournament. It wasn't just a scoreboard victory, it was liberation. The locker room after the game was electric. Shouts, laughter, embraces, raw, unfiltered joy. Melvin watched it all, feeling the weight of what he had done. He'd turned pain and anger into strength. But old wounds don't heal overnight. Coach Murphy, the same man who had shut Melvin out year after year, appeared in the locker room, carrying the look of a man forced to swallow a bitter pill. "Watson," he said, voice begrudging, "I checked the paperwork. You did submit your application on time, and, well, we want to offer you a spot on the varsity team for the spring tournament." Melvin met his gaze slowly. "Thank you," he replied calmly, "but I already have a team." It was a blow Murphy didn't recover from quickly. He left, leaving behind a silence full of unspoken truths and shattered expectations. That same day, Brett approached Melvin. "I never thought I'd say this," he started, "but you changed me. Without you, I'd still be the guy laughing at others just to feel big." Melvin shrugged. "We've all been somebody. The question is who we choose to be." He looked around the empty gym where his fight had begun. "Here on this court, we don't just play. We learn to live with dignity, with confidence, without fear, even when they tell you you don't belong." Saturday morning in the gym carried an energy far heavier than the usual clatter of bouncing balls and sneakers, scraping worn floors. It felt like a gathering not just of neighborhood kids, but of every soul who had ever been made to feel invisible, dismissed, or cast aside by a world too quick to judge and too slow to understand. Melvin Watson, the young man who had only recently stood silently on the sidelines, shackled by fear and doubt, now stood front and center in that space. Not as a player seeking approval, but as a coach, a leader entrusted with a whistle that was far more than a simple token. It was a symbol of a new chapter, a turning point. His sportswear was plain, marked only by a faded school logo that had seen better days. But burning inside him was a fire fierce enough to melt away the coldest walls of prejudice and skepticism that might dare to stand before him. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and worn rubber, mingled with the nervous whispers and the occasional tremble in teenage voices, all weaving into the fabric of the morning like a solemn reminder that this was where the real fight began. It was a fight not only for respect, but for the right to exist as their true selves, to claim their space under a sun that had long overlooked them. Melvin scanned the sea of faces before him. Some eyes were wide with uncertainty, others narrow with skepticism, and a few held the raw, primal fear of stepping into the unknown. This was his moment to prove that the little black kid from the streets, the one overlooked and underestimated, was not just capable, but destined to be the best mentor they'd ever have. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and warm, carrying the weight of someone who had walked through fire and come out tempered but unbroken. "I'm not your boss, and I'm not here to play the tyrant. I'm just a man who knows what it feels like to be misunderstood, and I'm here because I believe in you, because each of you deserves to be on this court, deserves respect, and deserves to win." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. "Who even gave this guy the whistle?" someone whispered, a tone dripping with disbelief. "No car, no fancy gear. What kind of coach is he?" Then cutting through the doubt like a sharp blade came Brett, once Melvin's fiercest critic, now speaking without mockery, for the first time showing something close to respect. "He's the best among us, and I want to learn from him." The gym fell silent, pierced only by a swell of applause that rolled like thunder through the space. It was the first time Brett's voice carried conviction instead of cruelty. Those first practices were nothing short of baptism by fire, a chaotic symphony of shouting, missed shots, hesitations, and sweat-drenched determination, all mixed with the fragile yet growing belief that something real was taking shape. Melvin didn't just teach technique, he taught resilience, the hard lessons of standing tall when the world aims to knock you down, of turning blows into fuel rather than scars. One afternoon, spotting a kid stumbling again over the ball, Melvin knelt beside him and spoke softly. "Keep your hands low. Move forward with purpose. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be readable to your team." The boy nodded, and moments later, sinking his first ever three-pointer, his face lit up with a light that words couldn't capture. A month later, Melvin's team claimed their first tournament victory. That scoreboard win was about more than numbers. It was liberation, proof that impossible could become possible when you refused to back down. The locker room buzzed with triumphant shouts and laughter, raw and unfiltered joy flooding every corner. Melvin watched them, knowing deep in his soul that he had fulfilled his purpose, transforming pain and anger into strength and hope. Yet the past doesn't loosen its grip so easily. Coach Murphy, the same man who had shut him out time and again, showed up in the locker room, his expression betraying the discomfort of swallowing a bitter truth. "Watson," he said grudgingly, "I checked the records. You did apply on time and, well, we want to offer you a spot on the varsity team for the spring tournament." Melvin met his gaze steadily. "Thank you," he replied calmly, "but I already have a team." The blow was a heavy one for Murphy, who left the room with a silence thick with unspoken regrets and unfinished sentences. Later that day, Brett approached Melvin with something rare: humility. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted, "but you changed me. Without you, I'd still be the guy laughing at others just to feel bigger." Melvin shrugged, the weight of their shared journey in his eyes. "We've all been somebody. The question is who we choose to become." He glanced around the empty gym where his fight had once begun. "Here on this court, we don't just play. We learn to live with dignity, with confidence, without fear, even when they tell you you don't belong." The sun streamed through the gym's windows, and the light seemed to warm the room anew, a silent affirmation that a new era was truly dawning. A small boy with a heavy past had become a coach who opened doors for others, lighting the way for those still finding their own. This was more than basketball. This was revolution.